So we hit 1,000 subscribers. I am so grateful to everybody who's been with us on this journey here at Grow Conversations. Whether you've liked, commented, subscribed, and watched some of our episodes and enjoyed them, we're really happy to have you here. We know it's been a little quiet on the Grow Conversations front. That's because we've been busy behind the scenes working on something really, really exciting. On Grow Conversations, you can expect interviews with prescribers, researchers, pharmacists, CEOs, and of course, cultivators. We're even taking this show on the road, filming with industry leaders from around the globe, whilst also making sure that you're up to date with everything that's going on here in the UK. So whether you're a professional, a clinician, a patient, or just someone who's interested in learning more about medical cannabis, stay tuned and hit subscribe. And for now, here's a look at some of our favourite clips from the last 26 episodes of Grow Conversations.
What would be really interesting for our viewers is to understand a bit about what your sort of day-to-day is like. And I don't mean, get up, brush your teeth and sit at your desk. We all know that what working from home life is like. But in terms of, I suppose, what are the different patients like that you see? What's the sort of opposite ends of the scale in terms of the patients, the types of patients that you see?
Sure. So we see patients of all ages from all parts of the UK. And I think for me, that's very interesting and exciting, because you do see regional variations in terms of the way patients may have been treated in the past. There's a wide range of patients in terms of age. So the patients from the age of 18 all the way up to patients in their 70s and 80s. And there are patients that know a lot about cannabis, and patients that know nothing about cannabis at all. And that's exciting, because you're never quite sure as to how a consultation is going to develop or how it's going to go. And I think the important thing for patients and doctors is to explore those ideas and learn about where a patient's coming from. There are a lot of patients that I see that have been self-medicating for quite a long time, and may not have engaged with their health practitioners for some time, and that sometimes means that there may be new treatments, conventional treatments, that they're not aware of. So that sometimes requires signposting back to the GP or other specialists. Being able to sort of help them with a medicinal cannabis route in tandem with other treatments as well. So we are, everyone that works at medical cannabis clinics in the UK, at the medical cannabis clinics in the UK, are trained professionals. They're doctors first and foremost. And cannabis is essentially a tool in the toolbox.
Just another tool in the toolbox. It's interesting what you say about those self-medicating patients, and the fact that they haven't seen, perhaps they haven't been in a doctor's office or in a consultation for some time. And I think that's something that I'm always fascinated by. The naysayers, if you will, the critiques of medical cannabis or the industry in general, or the concept, will say, this legal prescription route, it's just a way for people who were using illegal drugs to get it without getting in trouble. I think it's very cynical, frankly, that point of view. But to counter that, the idea that what we're actually seeing is patients who perhaps gave up on the healthcare systems, perhaps found something that worked for them that just wasn't a topic that their doctors could discuss, and therefore they felt, disenfranchised perhaps with their healthcare professionals. I certainly felt that myself, and I found cannabis was helpful for me. And I went to talk to a doctor, and he was very scathing about it. And didn't seem to respect or understand that it was definitely having a significant benefit, where I wasn't really offered much else in terms of pain relief. But to have patients who have been outside of the system and actually coming back into healthcare and seeing doctors for the first time in a long time, that alone is a success, isn't it?
It is, and I think the interesting thing about patients that do access medical cannabis clinics are that they are quite often the groups that you would expect to be disenfranchised, and quite often you find that they are older men, and we know that men have worse health outcomes. I mean, life expectancy for men is shorter, and we know that the average male interacts less with their GP than an average female does, and you sort of see an element of stoicism, really, where patients sometimes feel they've not had a good interaction, and then they go off and do their own thing. So to be able to re-engage with groups of patients that have otherwise, for whatever reason, not engaged with healthcare practitioners is challenging, but equally quite rewarding.
We see in Canada that we have, patients are legally able to grow their own, and it seems like the producers of medicines are still, happily making money as well. So is there sort of essentially just a divide where there's two different groups of patients here, those that want to be more self-sustaining and those that are more interested in sort of involving the doctor? Is that how that works?
There's quite a spectrum of it all. And most people who've been using cannabis for any length of time are interested in growing, but they aren't necessarily in a position to. So say somebody who's renting in an apartment or a house, or that's those sort of issues. With LED lights, it doesn't change the electric bill too horribly anymore, but it more often comes down to a question of space. People are allowed to choose a designated grower. So if they can contact somebody who can grow for them, a lot of people opt for that. One of the things we're blessed with in Canada is lots and lots of space, though. So there certainly are a lot of people who can grow their own. And some people do get into it quite big time. The way the legislation is written, if somebody's authorized for 1 gram a day, that allows them to grow 2 plants outdoors, which in our climate means 1 harvest a year, or they can grow 5 plants indoors, which means anywhere from 2 to 4 harvests a year. And it's like, I think the government really doesn't want people to grow outside. But it's very, very non-specific. And the people that do grow their own, sometimes we are now, under the recreational legislation, allowed to grow up to 4 plants per household. And so certainly that's a good starting place. A lot of people will still have relatively small grows. Some of them will just have those 4 plants and then buy things like the oils from the licensed producers. And if they want to inhale some, they'll use those 4 plants for those purposes. Some people will grow more than the 4 plants, but still keep their own plants mainly for inhaling, and they'll still buy the oils. They'll still stay with the licensed producer, especially for the oils. Now that we have the oil cartridge vaporizers, those are pretty hard for people to produce on their own. They sometimes will try new products from the licensed producers. So there certainly are reasons why people will carry on with a licensed producer. Also, even though they call it weed, cannabis is not the easiest plant to grow. There's certainly a lot to know about it. There's quite a learning curve. And so even if somebody is authorized for, say, 5 grams a day to grow 5 grams a day on their own, that doesn't necessarily mean by any stretch that they're going to actually get 5 grams a day, partly because of that imprecision of the gram to plant conversion. And also, what is a plant? A plant can be 2 feet tall, it can be 12 feet tall.
But I'm actually, a Hindu by background, so I'm of Indian heritage. I've always been interested in Ayurvedic medicine and thought, so much out there, so much out there in terms of treatments, and, learnt about cannabis through that. Because cannabis is actually, I don't know if but you're very well learned, by the way. I know that.
Oh, I don't. Yeah. I'll take the compliment. I'm sure I don't know as much about this as you do.
No. Don't underestimate yourself. But Soma, which features in the Atharva Veda, the Vedic scriptures, one part of that consists of 4 plants, and one of those is actually supposed to be cannabis. And I was reading about this, and I also learned that actually it was used in yagnas, which were also called fires, to eliminate like evil spirits and have, medicinal qualities really to help people heal. And then I wondered, because I've been programmed, and conditioned throughout medical school, even prior to that, throughout kind of my training as well, that cannabis is a bad thing. That actually cannabis causes nothing but problems. So actually when I was reading that really shifted my mindset. Then I went exploring, and then I found that actually medical cannabis had been made legal here for medical prescribing. then I pursued the training through the MCCS and haven't looked back since. Not to say that it wasn't without trepidation that I entered this field. Yeah,
I was going to say, because like you say, you've heard, as a psychiatrist particularly, you'll have heard the negative impact that it can have on people, presumably using it illegally. It's a whole other world when you start looking at the positives and what it can do for people, isn't it? And I think we don't talk about that in the context of mental health enough. So I'm really happy to have you on the show, because I know that you're particularly keen on advocating this sort of reimagining of cannabis and mental health. And that topic is, I think people will immediately say things like schizophrenia, they'll talk about paranoia, they'll talk about those sort of symptoms and triggers for that, and illegal use, and young people reporting to services, drug addiction services, mental health services. That's the conversation that we have had, I think, around cannabis and mental health in the UK. When we're talking about that 99.9% of the time. Let's have the other side.
You just sort of really want to fight in the short term. But I think generally my point with cooperation is we have a huge opportunity here as an industry to really do something quite special for patients. And actually, I genuinely believe as well, something quite interesting for medicine. I do see medical cannabis, given its unique nature of sort of hundreds of compounds and cannabinoids and terpenes and whatever else. So it's almost in medicine uniquely complicated as a medicine. But actually, if you allow yourself to understand it and think about it and don't be constrained by all of the traditional practices of pharma, I actually think there's a real opportunity to actually improve pharma, to actually think about things in a slightly different way. A great example would be personalized medicine. So at the moment, with personalized medicine, people are looking at obviously people's genes and what that means in terms of the reaction to different treatments. So it becomes very complicated when you've got a plant that's also got its own genes, and you need to compare the hundreds of molecules against a person's genome. Clearly, that is a difficult combination of data sets to think about. So what it requires, rather than just ignoring the opportunity, because I do think it's an opportunity, is looking at it and thinking, okay, how can we actually put new structures in place that are going to work for cannabis and for other medicines that are maybe less simple, but ultimately drive best outcomes for patients. So I think there's a big opportunity, and I think it can't be done by one company alone. And that's just one example of the opportunities. I think if we as an industry can join up and sort of recognise that there is a huge opportunity, as I've said, then I think actually collaborating, working together, sharing information, sharing experiences, having healthy and constructive debate as opposed to sort of shooting each other down and competing, which sometimes happens in every industry, but sort of healthy, constructive debate about how to actually get this industry to the next level, and then obviously executing on those conclusions. That's sort of what I'd like at a high level, and I think there's a lot of players that want the similar things.
Is it helping you with the anxiety, perhaps, getting up there on stage? Is it making that more difficult?
I wasn't sure to start with, and I was a bit wary about taking my medication before going to the gym because I wasn't sure. But actually, I found that because it reduces that anxiety, I'm able to focus more and actually get more out of my sessions than I would do with. I find with anxiety, just waste so much energy on it. Like it just takes up so much of your daily energy. So just by reducing that, you've got more to give to other things. So actually, so now it's part of my pre-gym routine when I'm training. THC is not allowed in competition for British powerlifting. It's part of a drug. It's a drug-tested sport, so it's not allowed in competition. It's fine out of competition, but you're not allowed it in competition, which is like from midnight the night before the day you compete. So I won't be able to use it whilst competing, but it certainly has helped me in my training to just relax me. There's no I wouldn't say performance enhancing issue. I think they found that in studies that there is no sports performance enhancing things from THC. It's more about treating my symptoms and getting me more on a level playing field with everybody else, to be honest.
My mom got to the age of 82 and she's having trouble sleeping. And she was probably, given her background, God love you, Mom, she's probably having trouble sleeping for 25 years, but she just didn't tell anybody. So then she went to her doctor and said, I'm having trouble sleeping. And he said, well, I've got this benzodiazepine product, you can try it for sleep. And she said, oh no. She said, the ladies at the Weavers Guild, one of them got addicted to those things and had to go to rehab at the age of 80. Oh. And she said, I'm not having those. And then she said, somebody told me I could get medical cannabis. And this is well after medical cannabis legalization in 2014. It's probably 2019. Okay. And the doctor said, well, I can't recommend that, Mrs. Dobbin. I just don't know enough about it, and I don't think it would be good for you. And she said, well, I want it. So he wrote her a prescription. And then I went down to the pharmacy, and we talked about all the different oils, and she tried a tincture. Anyway, cut to a few months later, she switched from that. She goes to a dispensary. She buys a spray bottle that she does 2 pumps with. She takes it at 20 minutes to 10 at night, falls asleep at 10, wakes up at 6 in the morning. And she was sharp before. Now she's like over the top sharp, like well rested, super happy. And it's made a huge difference in her life. Massive. And I've seen it in person, but this is a person who you never would have in a million years thought, my mom will be, using cannabis, medical cannabis, an alternative medicine. Would not have happened. Using any medicine was generally not a good idea. Oh, I cut my arm off. Well, I'll just sew it back on. That's like our parents and the grandparents' generation. That's how they think. Oh, my thumb's hanging off. Well, I just put a Band-Aid on it and I have to finish haying and milking the cows and doing all that stuff. It's fine, So.
On the clinical side of things, what are the misconceptions from other doctors that you speak to who aren't in cannabis?
There's, doctors are humans, and there's been, a propaganda war against this for, a lifetime. So many people have known no other narrative than cannabis as a substance of misuse. Mm-hmm. And, we're trying to challenge that is difficult. I think, vast steps have been made. However, in 2018, when it became legal, the majority opinion, I think, within the medical profession was that it was a substance of misuse. There wasn't that knowledge and attitude out there, and there was no incentive to learn that there was any different way of thinking about cannabis. And, you put your head down and you get on with the work you're trained to do, and it's rewarding and you're helping people. For someone to say, well, you were actually, misinformed about this the whole time, is a difficult pill to swallow for many people. It creates a dissonance. There's a psychological concept called cognitive dissonance. If your behaviors and thoughts are misaligned, it causes intrapsychic stress. And nobody likes that. So you have to change one or the other. You have to either change your thinking about things or your behaviors. And so nobody likes to be in a stressful situation. So it's very good to use the psychological defense mechanisms of things like denial. Say, well, that can't be the case. That's not what I know. That's not what I understand. And so, it takes a long time for people's thoughts and attitudes to change.
Some of these, so we're starting to get purples, we're starting to lose the green. It's much cooler in here. I think we're actually about 4.5 degrees cooler, and actually the big difference is the nighttime temperatures are significantly cooler than the previous rooms. And these have 2 weeks to go. This strain gets the low feed for a full 4 weeks at the end of its cycle. Keep nitrogen levels low, flush those out of the plant. Really, really, really resinous strain. So, let's talk first of all about the police and some of the issues the instances that you've seen. Can you explain in a nutshell what the general misunderstanding is? Why are patients having run-ins with the police at school over this prescribed medication?
Yeah, so firstly, I have 12 years experience as a criminal defence lawyer. Yeah. So I have engaged with the police extensively, and I have quite a strange relationship with them because I know it's a difficult job. And if I was burgled or something like that, I'd call them straight away and I'd want their help, But at the same time, one of the favourite things a police officer will say to a suspect or a detainee is that ignorance of the law is no defence. So when these issues are arising because police officers don't actually realise that medical cannabis is legal, I find that extremely frustrating. You know, it's not that it's been legal for 6 months, Alex, it's been legal for 6 years.
Yeah.
So to have this number of incidents happening due to a lack of awareness amongst the police that you know, medical cannabis is legal, I personally find that very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm always happy to give time to patients who have found themselves in this situation, purely because I have that wealth of expertise in dealing with the police, but also it's important, you know, that police are educated about this. I'm sure these police officers don't want to be wasting time on cases like this. It's just, you can imagine the reaction when you tell the police officer, actually, you're completely wrong about this.
They don't like hearing.
No, they don't. You know, it's very.
Is there an opportunity for us to start looking at women's health in a different way? And the answer I have is yes. You know, the challenge is that I believe the challenge is that I was speaking about this earlier, that women's anatomy is really complex. I mean, when you look at a model of a woman's pelvic region, there are so many organs, there are so many things, there are so many functions happening together, and everything is just crushed together. And so I can understand that it could be complex and challenging for a doctor to understand what's going on. But where I think the opportunity is to really look at women's health in a more holistic or integrative kind of way, because we can't be looking at each of these functions in silos. We have to really be looking at how all these systems and all these organs and, you know, all these details in your body work together to cause challenges. And my feeling is that there just hasn't been enough emphasis on that within the medical education system. And as a result, there aren't many doctors who really can take the time to understand how to work through that. So yes, there's definitely a lack of knowledge and a huge frustration. I mean, as I said earlier, and as you've said, I mean, I went to, I would say probably 12.5 doctors I saw over a period of several years. I left every appointment in tears, and because no one understood me, and at worst they dismissed me and thought that it was just, you know, in my head. And the irony of that is that chronic pain is in your head. It originates in your head. So we got to look at the head. We can't just look at the pelvis and say, here's some medication, here's some lotion. Like, we have to tie it back to what's happening in your head.
When you're trying to operate a clinic and a pharmacy, and you're trying to ensure that the doctors, the patient support staff, the GPs, the pharmacists, the dispensers are all happy, doing their jobs correctly, all the processes are being followed to enable us to then ensure that the patients are getting the medication on time, they're being booked in for their follow-ups, they're being constantly checked up on to make sure that the medication is providing relief and the service is up to the standard they're expecting. There are just many, and then we haven't even talked about marketing, getting patients to sign up, awareness, education. There's just many different moving pieces.
Spinning plates.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Spinning plates, absolutely. There's many plates that need to be spun to make sure that the wheels of this operation continue to move smoothly, as it were.
Yeah, and well, I mean, let's talk about awareness in just a little bit. But before we do, I think you mentioned doctors. Let's talk about doctors. How do you go about finding doctors to work in this space?
So when we first started, clearly we were looking for doctors who had already prescribed in the UK at another clinic or potentially independently. So I'm talking specifically cannabis-based prescription medicines. People
with experience. It is a niche space, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Clearly you can have 10, 15, 20 years working for NHS, consultant psychiatrists, consultant pain specialists, but without having prescribed medical cannabis before and having received feedback from patients who have used medical cannabis versus traditional medications, I think it's quite difficult to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So as such, initially when I went out and looked for doctors, we were looking solely for doctors that prescribed before.
Yeah.
clearly that were able to communicate very well. By virtue of the fact that they're doctors, you have to assume that they're all caring and they're in it for the right reasons anyhow, because my brother's actually a second-year doctor, and you have to go through a number of years of quite intense, underpaid work before you could even get anywhere close to becoming a doctor listed on the specialist register.
So I'm a hematologist-oncologist by original training, and I was at the Harvard hospitals when I trained. And back in the late 1980s, when Marinol, which is a synthetic THC, was first approved as an antiemetic in the United States, I was a young oncologist. So I was seeing cancer patients all the time. And, they have a terrible problem, as you know, with cytotoxic drugs and nausea and vomiting. I mean, it really is bad. You can't exaggerate that. And so people would ask me, I would ask them if they would like a prescription for Marinol, whatever. People would try it. And then they would come back in a couple of weeks and I would say, how did that work for you? And they would say, well, after I tried that, it was okay. But then I had my son go down and get me some pot. This is in the late 80s in Boston. Okay, I had my son go get me some pot, and actually that worked better. If I took the whole thing, it's like so it was very interesting. I mean, I've seen the entourage effect full blown myself up close and personal back in the 80s, when people would rather get an illegal substance that was full spectrum rather than take an isolate. It's not an isolate because it's synthetic, but it's just because that was legal, that they could buy at their drugstore. So that was a big lesson for me, and I think that's always stuck with me.
So we hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm honestly over the moon. No, let's not do that.
I'm gassed.
Yeah, I'm gassed, mate. Obviously, edit that bit out. Hold on. Phone's locked itself. There we go. To everyone who's been with us on this journey since the start, and anyone, cool. That'll do it.